On the morning of June 24, 1944, the gray waters of the Norwegian Sea stretched endlessly beneath a low, brooding sky. The war in Europe was entering a decisive phase, but far from the beaches of Normandy and the thunder of armies, another deadly struggle was unfolding over cold northern waters. German U-boats prowled the sea lanes, threatening Allied shipping and the fragile lifelines that sustained the war effort. It was into this hostile environment that Flight Lieutenant David Hornell of the Royal Canadian Air Force took off, commanding a Consolidated Catalina flying boat on an anti-submarine patrol that would become one of the most extraordinary acts of courage in aviation history. Hornell and his crew were part of a long, exhausting campaign against the U-boat menace. The Catalina, lumbering yet resilient, was well suited to maritime patrols. Its wide wings carried fuel for long endurance, and beneath them were mounted depth charges, deadly weapons designed to detonate beneath the surface and tear submarines apart with concussive force. But despite its strengths, the Catalina was vulnerable. It was not heavily armored, and its relatively slow speed made it an inviting target for anti-aircraft fire. Every patrol carried risk, and every sighting could turn into a desperate fight for survival. As the aircraft droned steadily over the frigid sea, scanning the waves for the faintest sign of a periscope or wake, the crew remained alert. Hours of monotony could be shattered in an instant. That instant came when they spotted a German submarine on the surface, U-1225. The enemy vessel, caught in the open, had little time to dive. For Hornell and his men, it was a rare opportunity. Submarines were most vulnerable when surfaced, and a well-executed attack could remove a lethal threat from the ocean. Hornell wasted no time. He turned the Catalina into position for an attack run. As the aircraft descended toward the target, the U-boat's gunners sprang into action. Tracers arced upward, stitching the sky with deadly intent. The Catalina shuddered as bullets tore through its fuselage. The radio compartment was punctured, and vital systems were threatened. Yet Hornell held his course. Pulling away would mean surrendering the advantage and possibly allowing the submarine to escape and continue its deadly mission. The aircraft continued its approach under intense fire. Shells ripped into the hull, and the starboard engine burst into flames. Smoke trailed behind the aircraft, and the situation grew increasingly dire. Inside the Catalina, crew members fought to contain the fire and keep essential equipment functioning. The smell of burning fuel and cordite filled the cabin. Every man aboard understood that they were perilously close to catastrophe, but Hornell pressed on. With calm determination, he lined up the attack. At the precise moment, he released the depth charges. The weapons dropped cleanly into the sea, and seconds later, the ocean erupted. Massive columns of water surged skyward as the explosions detonated beneath the submarine. When the spray subsided, U-1225 was mortally wounded. The U-boat sank beneath the waves. Its threat ended. Victory, however, came at terrible cost. The Catalina was gravely damaged. The starboard engine fire had weakened the structure, and parts of the aircraft were failing. Hornell now faced an agonizing decision. The plane could not make it back to base in its condition. The only option was to attempt an emergency landing on the frigid, unforgiving sea. The Norwegian Sea was no gentle refuge. Swells rolled heavily beneath the aircraft, and icy water stretched in every direction. Bringing a damaged flying boat down onto rough water required exceptional skill and precision. Too steep an angle or too much speed could cause the aircraft to break apart on impact. Hornell carefully judged the waves, maneuvering the crippled Catalina into position. The aircraft descended. The sea rushed up to meet them. With a tremendous impact, the Catalina struck the water. It bounced violently, skidding and shuddering across the surface. Miraculously, it did not disintegrate. Though badly battered, it remained afloat. For the moment, the crew moved quickly. They knew the aircraft would not stay afloat for long. Cold seawater began to seep in, and the structural damage worsened with each passing wave. Inflatable dinghies were deployed. The men clambered out onto the wings and then into the fragile life rafts, fighting the numbing cold and the instability of the swells. The water temperature was near freezing. Even brief exposure could sap strength and cloud judgment. The men struggled to organize themselves, securing what supplies they could salvage. Hornell, despite his own injuries and exhaustion, focused on ensuring that every member of his crew was accounted for and safely aboard the dinghies. Time passed slowly. The damaged Catalina eventually succumbed to the sea, slipping beneath the waves and leaving the survivors alone on the vast, indifferent ocean. They were far from land, adrift in a region notorious for brutal weather. High waves battered the dinghies, and the cold gnawed relentlessly at their bodies. Efforts to signal for rescue began immediately. Emergency equipment was used to transmit distress signals, but the earlier damage to the radio complicated matters. Still, hope remained that their last known position and the circumstances of the attack would alert Allied forces. The men scanned the horizon, straining for any sign of an approaching vessel or aircraft. The hours stretched on. The cold seeped through clothing and into bone. Hypothermia became a real and present danger. One of the crew members, Flight Sergeant Laurent, weakened rapidly. Despite the efforts of his comrades, he succumbed to the cold and slipped away, a grim reminder of the sea's unforgiving nature at T1 point. Another aircraft appeared overhead. It dropped a wooden boat in hopes of aiding the survivors. For a brief moment, hope surged, but the wind caught the boat, and the waves carried it beyond reach. The cruel twist deepened their despair. Still, they endured that a rescue boat was dispatched, but distance and weather meant that help would not arrive quickly. The men huddled together in the dinghies, sharing warmth as best they could. Hornell, though gravely weakened, continued to encourage his crew. He refused to abandon his role as leader. Even as his strength faded, his concern remained the ordeal lasted survival 21 grueling hours. The sea never relented. Every wave threatened to overturn the fragile rafts. Every gust of wind cut like a blade. The survivors drifted between hope and despair, clinging to life through sheer willpower and mutual support. Finally, after nearly a full day adrift, the rescue boat appeared on the horizon. The sight reinvigorated the exhausted men. As it drew closer, rescuers pulled them from the dinghies, lifting them aboard with urgent care. The ordeal at sea was over, but for Hornell, the struggle had taken too great a toll. Severely weakened by cold and exhaustion, he collapsed shortly after rescue. Despite medical attention, he succumbed to the effects of exposure. His final act had been one of selflessness, ensuring that his crew survived. 5 members of the Catalina's crew lived because of his leadership, skill, and courage. He had faced enemy fire without hesitation, pressed home a successful attack that destroyed a dangerous U-boat, executed a masterful emergency landing in treacherous conditions, and sustained his men through one of the harshest survival ordeals imaginable. His bravery did not end with combat. It continued through suffering, endurance, and sacrifice that in recognition of his extraordinary valor, Flight Lieutenant David Hornell was posthumously awarded the Victoria Cross, the highest award for gallantry in the face of the enemy within the British and Commonwealth forces. The decoration honored not only his decisive destruction of U-1225, but also his unwavering devotion to duty and to the men under his command. His story stands as a testament to the courage displayed by countless airmen who fought in the shadows over remote seas. While grand battles dominate history books, it was missions like Hornell's, lonely patrols over cold waters, that gradually strangled the U-boat threat and secured Allied supply lines. Each submarine sunk meant fewer merchant ships lost, fewer sailors drowned, and greater security for the armies advancing across Europe. The Norwegian Sea, once the scene of terror and desperation, became the silent witness to an act of supreme bravery. Beneath its surface lies the wreck of U-1225, a reminder of the deadly contest between hunter and hunted. And above those waters, the memory of Hornell's Catalina endures, a symbol of determination against overwhelming odds that in the end, Hornell's legacy is defined not only by the enemy he defeated, but by the lives he saved. Leadership in war is measured in moments of crisis, when fear and chaos threaten to overwhelm reason. On that day in June 1944, amid gunfire, fire, crashing waves, and numbing cold, he demonstrated what true leadership meant. He chose duty over safety, persistence over retreat, and sacrifice over survival. The sea closed over the Catalina. The wind carried away the smoke of battle. But the courage displayed that day did not vanish. It was carried forward in the lives of the 5 men who survived, in the honor bestowed by the Victoria Cross, and in the enduring story of a man who gave everything in service to his crew and his country. Such acts are not born of recklessness, but of conviction. Hornell understood the stakes. He understood the cost. Yet when confronted with danger, he acted with clarity and resolve. His final patrol was not merely a mission. It was a defining chapter in the long struggle for freedom across the Atlantic and beyond. And so the story of June 24th, 1944, remains more than a tale of combat. It is a story of endurance against nature's fury, of solidarity among comrades, and of sacrifice that ensured others would see another dawn. In the cold waters of the Norwegian Sea, amid the chaos of war, Flight Lieutenant David Hornell etched his name into history, not with words, but with courage that would echo for generations.